This podcast is brought to you by Ideate and Execute. Do you want to drive innovation in your organization, futurize your enterprise, ideate massively valuable new products, or execute them to market? Then contact us today at ideateandexecute.com and get started.
Why listen to the past when you can listen to the future?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Think Future podcast. I'm your host, Chris Kalaboukas, and once again, we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California, the innovation capital of the world. We're talking innovation, startups, the future. Not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. Show number 98. And today, we're talking about education. Now, education, if you ask me, is ripe for a huge amount of disruption. And I am finally seeing, because you never see this, the educational system actually changing. The government-run educational system in certain countries actually changing. So here it is. I was reading in Scientific American a few months ago that Australia finally decided to, I think smartly, disrupt its educational system and is replacing history and geography in primary school, now this is elementary school, with coding. So when I tell people about this, they go, they're appalled. Most people are appalled. They say, why can't they teach coding as well as history and geography? To them, my response is, well, we don't need to learn history and geography anymore, do we? At this point, we either have a heated discussion or I'm told to leave the room. Okay, I'm out of here. I wonder why people think this worldview is so far-fetched. I mean, as I said before, we're in an age where the near entirety of humankind's knowledge is available a few taps or a question to Siri away. We've had over 8 years of immediate, intimate access to most of the world's information wherever we are, whenever we need it. Right? I mean, aren't you completely lost without your cell phone? Aren't you completely lost without your smartphone? We're already cyborgs. We can't live without them. I mean, how long will it be before we realize that this is not going away? We no longer need to fill our heads with information that we typically memorize in class when we can access it in a second. If it's all available exactly when we need it, why do we need to spend time memorizing it in class? Why not just assume that the ability for humans to be connected to the internet and to tap into that knowledge at any moment is now part of what makes us human? That we have officially evolved ourselves using technology into a new kind of human. One that has enormous brain capacity. All of the humankind's accessible information can be in our heads in seconds. If we just acknowledge that, right? Just acknowledge it. That this is never going to go away, that we'll always have this instant, always connected access to the world's information. It'll always be available at a moment's notice. Then think of everything that's going to change. I mean, I applaud Australia for realizing that this always-on connection to the giant corpus of human knowledge is now part of us. And that educators just focus on those things that cannot be learned by a simple lookup. And that, of course, includes coding, which, if you ask me, is a really interesting combination of skills. We are talking problem solving, and as far as I'm concerned, in some ways, that's maybe the only skill you will ever need to have, since all skills stem from that, and learning a new language. Some might argue that learning an actual language is a lot harder, but have you seen JavaScript lately? I mean, why do all these popular languages have to be so strict when it comes to syntax? I mean, geez. That's why I love Ruby. But, some people look at me and go, Ruby? You're not a real programmer. Oh, I can hear what you're saying. I can hear what you're saying. I'll bet you you're saying this. It's like, I understand maybe not teaching geography, but what about history? You know what they say about history? If you don't know history, aren't you doomed to repeat it? How can we form any kind of worldview or understand ourselves without some kind of understanding of history, right? Fair enough. We might need some history. But does it really need to be forced upon us via rote teaching methods that we use today? I mean, learning history should be student-driven. Let them read. Let them learn. Besides, I mean, it already feels like people have forgotten about anything that ever happened more than 8 years ago. I mean, maybe this year, 2016, should be labeled 8AS. Maybe we should change the calendaring system. Because if you think about it, this is a new age of humanity. We could call it the year 8AS, AS after smartphone. And it's not just education. I mean, if we just realize that the next wave of innovative new products and services, we have to realize that we're all moving towards this concept of homo nexus, where we're all hyper-connected, always on, all the time. If we're all able to now access every bit of information anytime, like the Matrix, right? Just jack in that new knowledge. Think of everything that will change. I mean, what is a job interview going to be like, right? You're not going to have job interviews where you get sort of stuck in a room with somebody and they try to drill you for information and then you have to answer without accessing your phone. I mean, that's ridiculous. If you were on the job, you'd be able to get on your laptop or your phone or whatever and look up whatever you need to look up. That's not a real world situation. A job interview is not a real world situation anymore. So you don't have to think on your feet. You can access the data you need to. That's what you would do on the job. If you don't know something, you find out. The ability to find out fast is almost more important than actually knowing something. And what about the exam? Do you really need to have exams where you're sitting in a room with a bunch of other people writing out on paper, not having access to your phone, not having access to your laptop, not having access to the internet? No. That's not the real world. What do we testing here? The ability to memorize stuff or the ability to actually live and work and exist in the real world? Right? What about the sale? What about the app? I mean, when you were in that last job interview, did they lock you in a room with other people? And did they let you access your smartphone when somebody asked you a particularly hard question? No. You had to have that knowledge in your head. I mean, job interviews have got to be one of the most backwards experiences ever because they're so artificial nowadays. Maybe back before, maybe in the year, I don't know, what do we call a BS before smartphones? In the years before smartphones, in the years before we had instant, always-on connectivity to everything, maybe then being able to think on your feet was more important. But nowadays, is it really? As far as I'm concerned, being able to access that information, being able to look up the answers as quickly as possible, and then using those answers, that's what's valuable nowadays. Don't assume that everybody needs to know everything. Right? That's real world. Real world is I can tap my friends, I can tap the internet, I can tap all these sources, this giant, enormous corpus of human information at any time. That's the real world. So if you think about it, if you think everybody has access to everything at all times, then how's everything going to change? How's your business going to change? How will you cope with when your customers can look up your competitors immediately? I mean, a lot of companies still exist on paucity of information. They figure that if I'm standing in a store, I can't look up all of the competitors in the local area products. So I can just leave this store and go to another store. Or if I'm on one online store, I can look at a plethora of other places that are selling me the same thing. Customers are in control. Customers have all of the information. And some businesses still work on keeping customers in the dark. They figure, well, if we don't tell them this, they won't find out. Right? If we don't tell them we don't know anything about C#, if we have absolutely no C# personnel on staff, then maybe they'll give us this big C# project. No, they won't. Because it doesn't matter what you say in your deck. It doesn't matter if you have a giant C with a big sharp after it in your deck saying, we are the experts in C#, we've been doing it for 10 years. You'll be found out. Customers know everything. Prospects know everything. This is why you can't lie anymore. But then I talked about that on another show. So what do you do in the world where everybody knows everything? Well, you have to live in that world. You have to understand that world. And we have to be progressive and move into that world where, you know what? Things that can just be looked up should just be looked up. Anyways, that's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.